Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome in comdarchipodcast Season 4
Saison 4, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
and in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci
Thank you
d'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
to be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Dear listeners, hello and welcome to this comdarchi summer series, Season 4, Episode 86, written by Anne-Charlotte. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. Like the history of France, passing from wars of conquest to the grace and refinement of the court, then to horror and rising again from its ashes in a movement that seems perpetual, since when and until when? Today, let's head for Normandy and stop off at the Château de Gaillon. While this may be considered the greatest Renaissance castle of its time, it was also marked by austerity, gravity, and neglect. Did you know that it was once a prison for both men and women? We'll come back to that later. Gaillon's history is deeply layered. What are the origins of this history? They seem to be lost in the meanders of time. A charter from Richard II, Duc de Normandy, known as Richard the Irascible or the Good, mentions the castle for the first time in 1025. The silhouette of an ancient fortress can be seen here. The preserved moat to the east and the base of two ancient towers, which today form the foundation of the Grand Maison wing, are the legacy of the fortified castle. The work of specialists on these remains is far from complete. The Château de Gaillon was an English possession until 1196, when it reverted to the French crown following the signing of a treaty. This was the Treaty of Louviers. This treaty marked a truce in the war for Normandy between Philippe Auguste and Richard the Lionheart. The castle passed from one to the other, only to return definitively to the hands of Philippe Auguste. 1262. Saint Louis, Louis IX, seized the castle to Eudes Rigaud, Archbishop of Rouen. Rigaud inherited a dilapidated fortified castle, and he rebuilt the ruins. From then on, the castle served as a country residence for the archbishops until 1789. But in the meantime, some very important events took place. In 1337, the 100 Years' War began, and in 1423, the English occupying Rouen demanded that the then archbishop destroy Gaillon's fortifications. In 1453, at the end of more than a century of war, Guillaume d'Estouteville, who had in turn become Archbishop of Rouen, began work to raise the castle. The entrance pavilion and the staircase, known as the d'Estouteville Tower, have survived to this day. For a second time, it will be reborn from the conflicts of man. We are now fully into the Renaissance era, for the Château de Gaillon shows how Renaissance architecture slipped into medieval structures and expressed itself through a host of details. During the Renaissance, the Cardinal d'Amboise, a close friend of Louis XII who became Archbishop of Rouen, undertook the transformation of Gaillon's original medieval fortifications. He committed colossal sums of money. A total of 1,800 workers were hired over no less than 10 years. A perspective view by Jacques-André du Cerceau shows the different parts, some of which still exist today, despite the destruction of the French Revolution and the arrangements of the 19th century. While the flamboyant style triumphs here, Italianate decorations, sculpted pilasters, and friezes of grotesques and shells also feature. From 1501, the building site was initially managed by master builders from the Crown's staff. Compared to building and guild craftsmen, they were considerable figures, solidly trained in the Gothic tradition on royal building sites. They were reluctant to accept new ideas. But from 1506 onwards, the royal masons left the building site. They were replaced by masons from Rouen, who were more open to the customer's requirements, in this case, the new ideas of the Cardinal d'Amboise. I quote Jean-Marie Pérouse de Monclos in De la Renaissance à la Révolution, Histoire de l'architecture française, published by Éditions du Patrimoine in 1989. At Gaillon, the Archbishop's summer residence, Georges d'Amboise's predecessor had opened a major Gothic work site, which the Cardinal entrusted to craftsmen from the Loire Valley. 3 years before the Cardinal's death, the direction of the work underwent an inflection. The accounts showed a change of personnel. The personnel from the Loire was replaced by personnel from Rouen. Pierre Fin and Pierre Delorme, who were to manage the site, did indeed live in Rouen. But that doesn't prove that they were natives, notes Pérouse de Monclos. He adds, Pierre Delorme masters both styles, French Gothic and Italian Antique. Thus, from 1506 onwards, the Château de Gaillon became an avant-garde building. Focus on the entrance pavilion at Château de Gaillon. Dating from 1490, it was remodeled around 1509. This refreshes the ensemble with local materials but imported themes. The underlying verticalism of the building's 3 bodies on its 3 levels is a principle. Nevertheless, the facade is cut horizontally by 3 cordons of mouldings, cornices adorned with acanthus, dentils, and oves. These extend the entablatures, separating the 3 levels of the central body, supported by flat pilasters with composite capitals and grotesque embroidered shafts. The whole is crowned by a frieze alternating smooth metopes and triglyphs. The median part of the central body consists of a passageway under a low arcade on the first level and 2 loggia levels. The wall obstruting the opening must be mentally removed. On the second level, the lowered arcade is tangential to the moulding cordon. On the third level, the ceiling is flat. This is the principle of the superimposed loggias found in some Italian palaces, such as in the Palazzo Ducale in Urbino. The windows of the side pavilions, framed by flat pilasters, appear to be mounted on pseudo-consoles and are topped by semicircular pediments featuring a large shell framed by rosettes. The same is true of the attic windows, which have now disappeared but are known thanks to an engraving by Raphaël Sylvestre. At Gaillon, Renaissance elements replaced Gothic elements without altering the overall layout. This practice, perfected by regional master builders, was imitated in French architecture. Firstly, in the residences of surrounding regions, such as the Manoir de la Poissinière or Ronsard, but also at Montsoreau and Saint-Ouen de Chémazé, and finally, the Château de Blois after the accession of François Ier in 1515. Since Georges d'Amboise's major renovations, the castle has become a popular summer residence for archbishops, including Charles de Bourbon, Dominique de la Rochefoucauld, and Jacques-Nicolas Colbert. The latter was the son of a minister of King Louis XIV. He became archbishop in 1691 and called on Jules Rebours and André Le Nôtre to redesign the house and gardens. During the French Revolution, the property was confiscated from the church. It was sold in 1796 as national property. A disastrous period followed. 1812, the castle was bought by the state. It became one of France's 9 central prisons. For almost a century, 50,000 men, women, and children were held in the castle's prison. Over the years, a veritable complex was created. Wards were set aside for children, but also for industrial and agricultural labor, and for the so-called insane. Do you know what kind of sentences were served there? Here are a few examples, left to your own discretion. Violence against janitor, 22 years in prison. Hitting one's mother with a broom, 8 years. Theft of a handkerchief, 6 years, and public presentation in stocks, i.e., tied to an iron collar fixed to a post on public place. Theft of seeds from a field, 7 years, and public presentation in stocks. Theft of jewelry, life imprisonment. On the other hand, indecent assault was only punishable by 2 years. The Gaillon prison closed in 1901. It was occupied by barracks from 1902 until the end of the First World War. In 1939, the castle housed 400 people fleeing the Spanish Civil War and was soon used as a prison again during the Second World War. The German army set up a Stalag, a prisoner of war camp for non-officers. In 1941, the camp was made available to the Vichy government. At the end of the war, it was the collaborators who were locked up in Gaillon. In 1972, the state reinvested in the castle. Today it is trying to build its resilience, and I quote, "Making the Château de Gaillon fit for use by society, a project of this scale in time and space must be built with an eye to the major challenges facing the world today and shaping its future. As strongly as the Renaissance, which shaped Gaillon in the 16th century, the world has entered a phase of profound change, more general and inescapable by the day. Systemic changes are appearing at all levels: environmental, economic, energy, food, social. These general globalized changes, whether gradual or abrupt, form the backdrop to the Château de Gaillon project." End of quote. Would you like to take part? A fundraising campaign is underway, accessible via the castle's website, châteaudegaillon.fr, and the Fondation du Patrimoine. Unless, of course, the morass in which we're floundering bogs us down even more deeply and for years to come. That would be terrible. What Gaillon and history in general teach us is that power struggles, which ensure long, dark years for all, inflicting endless suffering, lead to balances far removed from the design of the warring factions. Man needs joy, not injunction and terror. As far as I'm concerned, the future belongs to those who find meaning in their path, those who cultivate their gardens. Architecture remains a path for enthusiasts. And so, dear listeners, we'll be back next week for our last issue of the summer on a lighter subject. An almost untouched castle, as if on hold, opening up the classical era. Until then, take care. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Thanks to Julien Rebours, sound engineer, who is collaborating with us today. Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at comdarchipodcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.